So good morning, everybody. This morning we're going to go a little further with meditation practice, but I just wanted to mention something for those of you who are new to Pema's programs or those of you who have been studying for many, many years. The beauty of all of this kind of material is that you don't need to know it all. If there's one thing you get, and it resonates, and it gets into you, and it begins to work on you, then everything comes from that one thing. One metaphor, one little line, one little loop of logic, any one thing that you get, if that becomes your, if that's what you contemplate, that's what you work with, the rest comes out. It's like a ballroom with 1,000 doors. Any one door will get you to the ballroom, and it doesn't matter which door. For some people can hear this, others can hear this. Some people can hear practical application, some people can hear philosophy. Some people can get there through contemplating end of life, get there through, do you know what I mean? So for instance, and like I mentioned, I'm a quote hound. So if something comes to me, particularly from someone I trust, in a short bite, like the line from Trungpa Rinpoche about sorry, I didn't mention his name, about being at a desk and, someone throwing the desk over. Just that, if that's all I work with, and then the rest from within that comes out. So we don't need to be very particularly anxious about it. It's just take on something. So I think it was yesterday, or maybe it was Friday night, Annie Love stumbled upon a classic when she said, the future is always the same as the present. Wow, that's great. Mess with that in your mind. Why is that true? What's linking? Why is the future? Why is it like Groundhog Day? Right? Because what are my propensities that I roll from one moment to the next moment to the next moment so that it all looks the same? Takes the mystery out of our life. So, all that is to say, just any one thing can really take us pretty much all the way, because the internal logic is that the roots of that thing, if you pull it, it's like a sweater. Remember sweaters, like sweaters? You pull one loose end, and the whole thing comes with it. So, the future will always be the same as the present. I think that'll be the name of a book. It was a great book namer. Maybe that's it. So, yesterday, we talked about the practice of accessing our basic awareness. This quality of unchanging, clear, open, pure basis of who we are. That is our birthright. It's our inheritance. It's what it means to be human. So that's the home base. All meditation practices, all teachings lead back to that. And when we become familiar with that and we become established in that, so that stays with us for a long period of time during the day, we're considered to be great meditators. When that continues throughout the day and night, that's what we refer to as enlightenment. So one analogy is that awareness, which is the host of everything, that allows everything, we could say that's like the ocean. Clear, vast, stable. And then our agitated mind, the mind that runs out, forgetting that this ocean is its home, always running out, becoming sort of beguiled by the sights and sounds, the sort of shiny objects of life. That agitated mind the analogy is that's the surface of mind. That's the waves and the the stormy surface. And until now, generally, we equate that experience with me. We're so accustomed to it that we think that's me. Today the weather is heavy, today the weather is nice, heavy, nice. And we constantly feel insecure because the very things that we're holding on to cobble together this perfect life, as we know, the very things we hold on to themselves are not of the nature of being able to be held on to because they're constantly moving and shifting themselves. It's like trying to hold rainbows in the sky. And so we feel anxious. We feel sort of always uncertain, a little ripped off, because it never works out. It doesn't work out not because we're doing it wrong or there's something wrong with life. It's just that's the nature of anything that we can hold on to. It doesn't lend itself to that, so we have no peace. So peace and fundamental well-being is the reconnection with this basic space. By definition, because this basic space isn't made up of anything, it can't change. And because it's changeless. And because it's changeless, it's the nature of peace. And the nature of peace is that's when we refer to these words that sell books like joy. That peace is what we refer to as joy. Joy here is not an emotion. It's a basic state of being. So the essential practice is to learn to come back to that basic space. And then we also can learn to allow the heavy water, the waves, to calm somewhat. And to the degree that the surface of the water can calm somewhat, then it's easier for us to access the ocean itself. And why I'm saying somewhat, is because it's the nature of the surface of an ocean to move. It's the nature of mind to have experiences, to have thoughts and emotions. It's its nature. Dogs bark, mind moves. And so in our meditation, in our life, mind will always be moving, always be having thoughts. But the question is whether we identify ourselves with that aspect of our experience as being me, or we understand that that is what we say, that's the display of mind. Like the waves are the display or the play of the ocean. The waves in this case are the expression of mind. So we don't want to control that expression. But what we can do is become familiar with it and work with it in such a way that right now, the kind of choppy, agitated, crazy energy of that display can calm. And so I mentioned Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche yesterday, and he said, the crazy monkey becomes a tamed elephant. And so, that's what we can do with meditation. So yesterday we talked about non-meditation, in other words, just allowing us to rest in this basic space of fundamental awareness through shamatha without support, open awareness. And today I want to talk a little bit about how to work with the waves. So the waves, again, are our fascination with the senses, what arises in the senses, sights, sounds, smells, tastes, sensations, including thoughts and emotions. So yesterday I mentioned that the essence of meditation is awareness. So whenever we knowingly apply a quality of mind, a quality of simple, light attention or knowingness, when we do that knowingly, intentionally, then that activity, whatever it is, becomes meditation, becomes meditative awareness. That could be doing the dishes, it could be walking, it could be following the breath, it could be talking, anything. If there's a quality of bringing mind to that thing, then it becomes meditative awareness or meditation itself. So then, from that point of view, we could talk about any number of meditation techniques. And the classic ones are bringing awareness to sound, bringing awareness to bodily sensation, bringing awareness to a visual object, an imagination, an imaginary figure, or something in our mind. We could bring it to walking, as they were doing here last week. Anything and everything is a perfect doorway into meditative awareness. There's nothing that's out of bounds. This is why we say we can bring meditation to our life 24/7. Even when we're really, really sleepy and groggy and dull on our meditation cushion, bring awareness to that. Our eyes getting heavy, our body getting heavy, our mind getting thick, bring awareness to that, awareness to that, awareness to that. That, by the way, is a perfect analog for bringing awareness to the process of dying. As things begin to get heavy and fall apart, to continue to bring that awareness in. And so, as Pema said, when the elements have dissolved, we have a direct access to this basic ground, what Pema referred to as the mother awareness. And so the child awareness, which is our awareness, can recognize, oh, here it is, I'm home again. And when we stay there, we're enlightened. We have the opportunity to be enlightened. So, which one should we use? Probably the easiest support for meditation to use is sound. So then how do you do meditation with sound? I think you already know. The sound is there. We don't need to do anything. In fact, sound is so beautiful because it's completely passive. Actually, the sound isn't there. The sound is here. Just bring our awareness to sound. Sorry. The sound is there. And then just bring our awareness to that. So I'm going to ask you something silly. Please raise your hand if you hear the sound. That's meditation. Right? Simple. So let's play with it for a little bit. So again here, a good meditative posture or meditation posture is helpful. A good posture opens up both our body in terms of our muscles and our structure, but also a good posture affects the quality of what we refer to as the subtle body. And the mind, as long as we have a human body, our mind and the energies of our subtle body are related. So when we can create a healthy subtle body, then mind settles down. And that's all I'll say about posture, because I don't have very good posture, so I'm not a good teacher of posture. But basically, the essence of a good posture is an upright back. I encourage you, again, to work with eyes open, but here with sound, eyes open or closed is fine. But there's two other points that are really helpful. Tuck your chin in just a half inch. And breathe, allow yourself to breathe naturally through your nose and your mouth. We don't need to control your breath. Just bring your mind, your gentle attention to the sound. If you find yourself getting carried away in a daydream or a dialogue, just notice it and then come back. And now that that sound has gone, you can bring your attention to whatever other sound you hear. Okay. So that's the practice of calm abiding, using sound as a support for your meditation. But as we're doing that practice, you see the lights are on, you feel your body in the room, thoughts can come and go, and sometimes little flashes, what we call flashes of insight. Something will come to you, a memory, a different way of seeing something. So if we know how to work with this quality of mindfulness or awareness lightly, then there is space for things to come up and move in you. If we're not trying to hold mind, in the same way as I said yesterday, if you try to hold a 4-year-old, it doesn't go well. If you give that 4-year-old space, then they naturally settle. So similarly, in the application of our awareness to the support, hold it lightly. And then we can settle, and other things can ripen in us. So then a classic one, many of you may already be doing this, is working with breath. So breath is a technique that is probably the most widely taught one, and there's many ways of teaching the breath. Pay attention to the sensation as it moves in your nostrils. Pay attention to how it comes into your throat. Pay attention to the rising and falling of your body. Pay attention to the sensation of the breath going out. If we understand that the intentional application of awareness is the essence of meditation, then it doesn't matter what we do, right? So if you're taught a certain way, then do that. It's perfect. So let's try it out. I'm going to teach breath in a couple of different ways. So to start with, again, breathing naturally through your nose and mouth. We're not trying to control the breath. We're not trying to make it long or short, deep or shallow. It will change naturally. So here we're not working with the principles of pranayama as you might in yoga. This is just using breath simply as a support. So here, just mingle your awareness, mingle your attention with the breath as it goes out, and then as it comes in. Almost as if you're breathing on a frosty morning and you go out, and the mist coming out of your mouth, you go out, and then come back. Or the movement of the tide, out and in, very gently. Follow it out, bring it back, follow it out. Let's try that. And again, if you get lost in a daydream, then just come back. Okay. So, this idea of getting lost Loss means that our awareness is no longer with the breath. It has been carried away, it's been pulled away into something else. Distracted, lost, whatever we want to say. This is not a big problem. Actually, becoming distracted, noticing it and coming back, that's the essential skill. We don't need to learn how to breathe, right? We don't need to practice breathing 20 minutes in the morning. And we don't need to be fixated on the breath, because if we're fixated on the breath, there's no learning. It's like I live in a ski area in Colorado. I don't ski, thank goodness, but if I did, I remember they say, if you're not falling, you're not training hard enough. It's a big training city for the Olympics where I live. In the same way, if we're not getting distracted, we're holding too tightly. Getting distracted, coming back, getting distracted and coming back. That's the skill, is when we get lost, to know how to come back. It's the coming back is the skill. And then eventually, over time, getting lost, noticing and coming back becomes spontaneous. And then we're well trained. First, there's effort. Oh, don't get lost. I'm lost. Come back. Oh, I'm lost. Come back. There's a certain amount of effort. That's called effortful mindfulness. And then eventually, over time, it's like the noticing and returning are simultaneously. That's called effortless mindfulness. So knowing how to work with the mind in such a way that you allow for its natural vitality, just like working with children. Allow their natural wildness and just gently work with that so it matures and they don't lose their basic energy and joy of living, right? They're sort of... Same here with mind. So this discussion is the discussion of not too tight, not too loose. And only you know how to find that. If you're not getting distracted at all, you're too tight. If you're exhausted at the end of your meditation, you're too tight. If at the end of 20 minutes you're not sure what in the hell you've done for the last 20 minutes, you're too loose. And in between, you navigate, right? You go this, a little too tight, a little too loose, too tight, too loose. This becomes the finesse, the kind of finesse of a meditator over time, to know actually where the sweet spot is in the middle. Does that make sense? So at the end of your meditation practice, you're not wiped out, you're not exhausted, you're not delighted that it's over, that it's fairly natural. Like no big deal. Within that, thoughts and emotions will come and go. Just like clouds in the sky. Thoughts and emotions are not a problem here. Thoughts and emotions, as I said, are the natural energy. Just like a puppy barks. It's a natural energy of a puppy. A puppy that didn't bark would be kind of weird. So the difference then is whether when a thought or an emotion arises, whether we latch onto it and run away with it, whether we run away with the thought and the emotion, or whether we just notice it and allow it to come, and then just in that space of the awareness, it just goes. Thoughts and emotions, actually, I think even scientifically we know that they just arise and they stay for a very, very short time. It's our holding on to them that keeps them alive. So here we just let them go. Again, if you don't have any thoughts and emotions, you're holding too tight. If someone comes to me and says, I never have thoughts and emotions in my meditation, I think either you need to see a doctor or you need to loosen up a little bit. Because during the day, we're confronted constantly with thoughts and emotions, ours or someone else's. So we need to know how to navigate that with a sense of awareness, a sense of presence. Similarly, as I think Pema will talk more about, as we go through any transition, any bardo, as we go through the dying process, there will be a lot of appearances happening and a lot of experiences coming up. So what we're working with is the ability to navigate our life with a sense of balance. To be present with whatever the hell is going on, including our dying. So let's try one more rendition of the breathing practice. In this slight wrinkle, what we're going to do is we're going to bring together a little bit the working with a support and then the working with the openness or the groundlessness in one practice. This is quite elegant, and this is the way that Pema and I learned in the 70s from Trungpa Rinpoche. So here what we're going to do is again, mingle your mind or your awareness with the out-breath. And at the out-breath, as it's turning around, just rest out there, just for a beat. Okay? Just a beat, not a long time, just a second, 2 seconds. Just then come back. Let's try it. Mingle your mind as the breath goes out, and then come back. And now, just for a minute, open up into open awareness. Drop the technique and just open up. Okay. So, a lovely way to structure a meditation session each of you may have been instructed in a certain way by your tradition or your teacher, which is perfect. But a lovely way to structure a meditation session would be to begin with a minute or two of just open awareness, shamatha with no support. And then within the body of the meditation session, use one support or a couple of them. Visual support, visual object, sound, breath, use a couple of them. And then end with a minute or two of open awareness. So this makes a complete practice. And finally, before Richard comes on, I really encourage you to understand that working with mind in this way is simply training, like any other training. So I am told that if you go to the gym to work out, that doing this is the practice. If you look to see how it's going from moment to moment, you won't see anything. In the same way, really encourage you to understand that when there's a clear intention mixed with the application of an authentic method, by definition, there will be a result. That could be cooking, sports, or meditation. So please don't judge your meditation. Just do it. And by definition, whether you see it or not, things are moving, things are shifting. If you have to judge it at all, judge it in 6-month increments at the very most. And just have some simple trust that this practice and these practices have been tried and true for the last couple of thousand years at least. So if it's good for all of them, it's probably going to work here. So really, just an aspiration to tame one's mind, to benefit oneself so that we can benefit others. This is all we need, and an authentic method, that's it. You have everything you need right there. So finally, I want to say it's been a great joy to spend a couple of days with you and Pema, and I really appreciate your patience with the fact that you fell through the cracks, and here I am. So thank you, everybody.
everybody. I have one more quick announcement before we bring Richard on for a yoga stretch. Next year, as I mentioned to you earlier, and I'm telling the live stream audience now for the first time, the Pema is coming back May 18, 20 next year. I was asked by the reservations department to have you not go down after the treat. They're overwhelmed because we have a new crowd coming in this afternoon. But you can call toll-free 800-944-1001. The phone number's on the website. It's in our catalogs, 800-944-1001. I think it's going up for registration October 2nd, which is 2 weeks from tomorrow. But if you want to call when you get home tomorrow or next week, they'll put you on a callback list. All right, thanks so much. Take care.
Good morning, everybody. So for those of you who are joining us, I thought we'd do a little variation today again. So same postures, same movements, but this time we'll work with meditative awareness. I'll say the name of the posture, we'll come into it, and then I'll just mention a body part you'll go to and let your attention rest there. And just see how that goes, okay? So you'll place your awareness on each part of your body as we move, and it may change from posture to posture. It will, okay? So we'll begin with earth pose. And place your attention in your feet. And then let your attention travel up your legs, up your spine, up into the center of your skull. And feel your groundedness and your length. Then inhale your arms up overhead, palm to palm, Great Eastern Sun. And feel your hands coming together. Look up. Bring your attention to the back of your neck, your face. Bring your hands down to the heart, joining mind and heart. Feel your breathing, heart beating. Come back to your feet on the ground. Offering. As you hang, place your attention in your lower back. The weight of your head. Your arms hanging all the way down to the fingertips. Let go. Bend your knees and come back up. Courage. So feel your eyes and your face. Warrior. Turn your foot 90 degrees. Turn your hips to the right. Arms rise up. Hands come together. Interlace the fingers. Bend the knee. So, bring your attention to your lower back again. Your left hip. Your long arms. Your sinking pelvis. And then come back. And very simply reverse your feet. Turn, arms up again, hands together, interlace the fingers, bend the knee. Feel your left knee, your left foot, your right foot, your long arms. Come back. Bring your hands to your hips, 4 directions. Exhale forward. Feel both feet going down through the ground, and feel your tailbone rising up, your head hanging. Inhale up, support your lower back. As you go back, take a big breath out. Again. Come back. Turn over the right leg. Bend. Place your attention in your entire body. Just feel where sensation is. Come back up. Reverse your feet. Same posture, opposite direction. And where do you find sensation now on this side? Come back up. Prepare for flying pose, Garuda. So right foot turns out, left foot pigeon-toed. Hips forward. Arms out, palms facing forward. So remember that crease in the hip. Crease. And then rotate. So bring your attention to the center of your chest and the big space between your arms. See if you can increase that space, open it up. Fingers, spread them wide. Back to your feet, grounding. Come back. Reverse your feet. Hips forward. Always reset. Palms forward. And slowly, hinging, hinging, hinging. And now, rotate the arms. Come back to the center of your chest. The big space between your arms getting bigger out through your fingertips. The feet grounding down, the legs strong. And come back. Bring your feet together. And let's join heaven and earth with inhale and exhale. Inhale. Again. Again. Let's come back to earth. So this time, I won't mention the body parts, you'll just go there on your own. I'll say the posture names, and we'll move in silence. Earth, Great Eastern Sun, gather the mind. Offering. Courage. Warrior. To the right. Warrior to the left. Come back. 4 directions with the breath. Flying. Flying. Come back. Feet together, joining heaven and earth. Heaven, earth. Heaven, earth. Heaven, earth. Heaven, earth. One more time. Last series. Let's try and experiment and do this in complete silence. Just follow each other's movements. Be with your breath. Thank you so much. It's been so much fun. Thank you.
So I thought I might, well, first of all, good morning. I thought I might start with some questions. So, And I thought the first question could be from online people.
Okay, whoa. There we go. Good morning.
Good morning.
This question actually come up a couple of times, so I thought it would be appropriate. Going back to the bardo of dying, we've been talking about if a person is conscious and guiding
right.
them through the dying process.
Right.
But the question is, for those suffering from Alzheimer's and dementia, are there ways to engage them in these practices to prepare them for dying?
Well, probably by the time that someone has dementia or Alzheimer's, no. But in a way, in terms of preparing them, like I'm suggesting now for everybody here, that we use the bardo, the natural bardo of this life, to train for tomorrow and next week and next year and however far we're willing to consider it goes, next life. So, but we can help them definitely by our, I guess you could say, our vibe. Just being there with them, like holding their hand, just sending love, doing Tonglen, sitting and meditating, anything where there's would be just a feeling of peacefulness and being cared for. Because people with Alzheimer's and dementia for quite a long time are very much in the present. I mean, that's it, present. And so you be with them in the present, and that's a big support for them. And then was part of the question if people are unconscious or
Well,
not?
I was going to mention that this would also be a way, if they are terminally ill and they've gone into a state of unconsciousness, you would perhaps
It would be the
do
same, actually.
Yeah.
It's very dubious whether someone is actually completely gone or not when they're
Right.
in a coma. So you just behave as if they could hear you and you could talk to them, and or not talk and just be there as a strong, loving, steady presence.
I have read somewhere that hearing is the last sense to go when you're dying, so you could actually speak to them and maybe something might get through.
Yeah. Well, according to this, which, they're first to say that it's not necessarily in a sequence, but it's the second to go. First is sight, which isn't blindness. It's just everything becomes very hazy and indistinct, and you can't quite make people out. Then the next, and then speech is, they put it in different places, but then hearing, and then the other senses, like smelling, tasting. But you can still talk to people, even if they seemingly can't hear,
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So now of this long line, I'm going to take 3 questions. Then the rest of you can stay there for the next round, if you like. But
Hello there. It's an honor. So I went to a retreat several years ago, a yoga retreat, and there was a Buddhist monk there, a female from Salt Lake City. And one night she gave a lecture about big mind. And I left with such a nihilistic impression. It was so dispassionate, so detached. I wondered how anybody could move through the world in such a position where nothing had any meaning. So my question is, where is God in this?
Well, of course, that's a really interesting question, since if you were looking in the college textbooks about all the religions, they'd be the first to tell you that Buddhists don't believe in God, However, it's a word that means different things to different people, right? And sounds like, well, from what you just said, it has something to do with compassionate presence, from what you just said. So I wasn't there to hear her talk, and I don't know how I would have heard it either, you know. But what about this weekend? Have you gotten that nihilistic feeling, or more a sense of compassionate presence, or what?
More, it's different. More of a compassionate sense, I have to say, than the nihilism I walked away from with there. So,
Yeah, because there's, I hope that's true, because that was when Tim and I were talking about how to do this. We definitely wanted to say there's sort of two things. Being able to rest your mind in open presence, which is not nihilistic. It's really the opposite of nihilistic. It's very open to whatever is arising. And because your mind isn't all filled with views and opinions and things that kind of filter it, so you're not having like a direct relationship with sounds and smells and people's faces and emotions, you know, more available. So that was one thing, and the other was the heart, you know, the warmth, the caring, the love. Bodhicitta is its sort of Buddhist name. But it seems very, very important. And when it comes down to it, it doesn't matter really what religion or non-religion you are, even what your beliefs are, people need to feel cared for and loved. So that was what was so beautiful about Mother Teresa. It was that her mission was so simple. I mean, difficult to accomplish, but that people didn't die feeling that nobody cared about them, that people died feeling loved, you know, and cared for. So picking people up off the street who would have just died completely without a single person caring about them, you know, and just bringing them in and starting to, so that the end of their life, there was a feeling of being cared for. And then in the terms of what the Tibetan Book of the Dead says, it says that that's the best frame of mind in which to live, in which to die, and in which to, if you have any sense of it, go through this bardo transition to a new life. Which I want to say again, I'm not trying to push that view. It is just the view of the book, you know. But in any case, it becomes kind of mysterious. Which bardo are we talking about, you know, in terms of, is it the bardo right now, you and I talking here, or is it the memory of yesterday or this morning at breakfast? Is it that passing sense of a whole lifetime is finished, that those little vignettes? You know, did that make any sense to you, that practice of just reflecting back on how, of impermanence and how it's moving on?
yes, it did. Although, like somebody mentioned, I think it was yesterday, that feeling of sadness. If you get trapped in that feeling of everything, you know, goodness, you know, this moment, breakfast is already gone, you know.
Yeah, right.
And,
Even you coming up at the mic and beginning your question is already gone, you know.
Right. And, you know, I've talked to people about the nature of memory and how the present is probably only maybe 2 seconds long, and by the time you're in that 2 seconds is already gone. And
It's probably
you
not
know,
even
so-
2 seconds long, you know.
Yeah. So
It's
it goes by fast, obviously.
You could really begin to question if there isn't even any present. Or,
Right.
and if not, what is there? You know? Now we're getting nihilistic again. So,
It was very disturbing. I mean, it sat with me for a long time. It really did. Yeah. So thank you very much. I apologize if that was a Buddhism .01 question.
that's, I like those questions. But one thing I just wanted to say about sadness, it came up yesterday, like, if you really begin to contemplate impermanence the way that we've been suggesting, like more ongoingly, and so that the present also, as you say, just is continually not here anymore, like memory. It's all passing memory, as Trungpa Rinpoche said. So I think you're onto something when it starts to evoke sadness. It's like you're beginning to get the mood or quality of why we don't hang out in groundlessness anyway, because we don't really like those uncomfortable feelings. But part of the meditation training, and as Tim was saying, if you do it, it's just like the muscle, training the muscle, it's cumulative in terms of what insights come to you. And you begin to, after time, really begin to have confidence that you're big enough to hold sadness, you're big enough to hold any emotion that might come up without kind of like having it take you under, you know? Mm-hmm. So that might sound like a big leap, but definitely that is possible for any of us, you know? To just be able to hold those things in our heart, as some people use the terms, it's like you get in touch with the energy of sadness, or the energy of irritation, or the energy of fear. And but you don't feed it with the storylines, if that makes sense. And so it just remains as energy, and sometimes people just talk about it as pure sensation. So hopefully this isn't sounding nihilistic again, but it's just to say that we don't have to be taken down, dragged down by our emotions, our reactions to things. We can let them soften us up, actually. Let them soften us up and connect us with other human beings. Like, you feel sadness, then you think of all the sad people in the world, and you send love to them. You send caring to them.
Do you feel joyful?
Do I?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I am a joyful person, if I may say so.
Do you stay in that state all the time?
What?
Do you stay in that state all the time?
No. I don't. But when I say joyful, you know, basically, I was born, and when I came out of my mother's womb, I was holding a glass that was half full.
Thank you.
It was a miracle.
It's so wonderful to get to stand in front of you. Wow. I first want to say thank you so much for your commitment and your courage on your journey, and the way you've shared it with so many of us. Thank you. I guess my burning question today, and it's been for a while now, is how do we balance what's going on in our world and still show our concern, to help in the way we can, to speak when we feel we should speak, to take a stance. And I guess what I'm really asking is, how do we balance the outer with the inner, and maybe more specifically, Pema with Rachel?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I can see where Pema and Rachel meet.
She should interview you, actually.
That would be interesting.
It would be interesting.
But, speaking for not so much myself, I don't consider myself an activist. Maybe next lifetime. I would like to be, but somehow I turned out being a Buddhist teacher instead, which is a kind of, it helps.
Yes.
So, but speaking on behalf of so many friends and people that I admire who are activists, what I hear again and again, is that the inner allows you to do the outer. The inner is what keeps you, gives you some perspective, and allows you to keep the heart open in more and more challenging situations, and it also lets you forgive yourself and have some kindness towards yourself when the heart closes down and can't do it, when there's aversion or fear or these various things. Anger is a big one. Burnout, of course. And so the inner becomes like food, what sustains you and nurtures you and allows you to continue with some kind of open heart and then big-mindedness. I think they just work together beautifully. And without the inner, it's hard to do the outer, I think, for very long.
Yeah.
And usually it can get much too like goal-oriented, and you set out to change the world, and then 10 or 15 years in, you just collapse in despair because things are getting worse and not better, and then you give up, because there isn't some kind of inner process that's going on. So knowing what's happening with your mind, your heart, and your emotions, that sustains you,
Okay, thank you so much.
So one more for this session, and then I'm going to tell you what happens next.
Hi. My question is, when there's a big thing coming up in my life, I tend to want to plan it all out, and I'm going it over in my mind with the way I want it to be and what am I going to say, and it seems like I'm trying to sort of control what's going to happen in my mind, or I set myself up with lots of expectations of how it's going to be, versus just sort of going into it fresh and open and just experiencing it, as it's going on, and kind of having confidence that I'll be able to handle it and I'll know what to say and I'll know what to do. Kind of seems like two different approaches. So I just thought maybe you could talk about those different approaches in this context.
So are you saying you're more the first approach?
I am, but I tend to try and...
You have a longing.
A longing to be the latter.
So I have a question for you, a genuine question. Does it ever work out exactly like you planned it?
No. No,
Isn't that
I seem to
interesting?
torture myself.
Yeah. And then there's the emotional reaction about it not working out just as you planned. Yeah, so I was once, someone said to me, there's little things people say to us over the years that make a big impact. It was almost in passing, but the expression was that the natural choreography, that was the word that was used, of life, when you leave it alone, the choreography is much more inspired and creative and interesting than anything your mind could come up with, And that made me curious, to sort of just see how will it work out if I'm not pre-planning it. So there's a lot of instruction, for instance, using Buddhist meditation and things as guidelines for living in the bardo of this life. Like before you go into a meeting, you plan well, you know what you want to say, and then you leave your notes outside and walk in and just sort of see what transpires. It's not like you haven't thought about it at all, It's like that's how I give talks, you know. I've read a lot during my retreat about the bardos and dying process and so forth, but then when I actually come out here, I'm never quite sure, you know, what's going to come out. And so it's better that way, you know, I find, you know, not too pre-planned.
Yeah, and it seems like the pre-planning, there's so much,
Controlling, yeah.
you know, it's like I'm you know, like clinging to something, I don't know, trying to,
So the best advice that I've been given is that you just notice your tendency to control, kind of own it with kindness. You own it with kindness. And you are very aware of the tendency, and sometimes you can interrupt the momentum of it and just step out and do something different, and sometimes you can't. It's just too seductive to just do the same thing. But then you notice the whole process of going in with the plan, and it's very different than just mindlessly or unconsciously wanting to control everything without any awareness that you're doing that. But on the other hand, not criticizing yourself for it, just noticing, you know.
okay.
And then you begin to understand very much other people who have the controlling impulse, which is a lot of us. But just think about it really realistically. Even though we do this because we want ground under our feet, some sort of certainty, but when you start to contemplate impermanence as an ongoing life thing, you know, like reflecting back at breakfast time, or waking up this morning, or going to sleep last night, and now it's gone forever, you know, and now we're here, and then that will be past. And when you start to do that, then you realize how impossible it would be to control any of this, you know, because it's like more like a river than like made out of rock. It's flowing, dynamic. So you can't really control it. So you're setting yourself up for a suffering.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So the other people who are there, you can stay there if you wish, or you can go back and scramble out here the next time I say it. I'm not quite sure what it's like to sit on the floor and listen to a talk, but what's said is your first opportunity for awakening is handed to you, to everybody, even insects, as they point out. When everything dissolves and suddenly the true nature of your mind is just fresh and open and unobstructed, like a clear, open sky. Pretty much, you know, that's what meditation, open awareness is pointing towards, that we can connect with that at any time. But at death, it's effortless because it just happens. And so the main instruction is relax, which is not so easy to do when everything is dissolving. But that's why we train now in whenever we feel groundlessness. Like, what is our reaction now to bad news or sudden shock, or not getting what we want or getting what we don't want? I mean, what is our reaction now? We begin to notice that, and with kindness, and we begin to, through meditation practice, you begin to get the sense that you can always look up and the sky never went anywhere, and your mind can rest in that space. And so when I would teach the pause practice, that was, well, I still do teach the pause practice, that it's part of the intention of it, is that you're walking along your generally speaking, we're always talking to ourselves. And then, but then it occurs to you to pause and just look out. And it's like everything stops and slows down. And it's like connecting with the open dimension of your being, connecting with the open awareness, connecting with the true nature of your mind, unfettered. And then you just go on and keep walking or whatever you're doing. But you punctuate it that way. So first chance to wake up fully is right there when the dissolution is completed. But should you miss that, then some say you go unconscious, some say it's just that then that a wide open mind begins to project colors and lights and so to just go back a little bit. So at the first stage, the main instruction is get used to groundlessness in this life as something not to fear and reject, but to become comfortable with. Use this life in that way, and it will lead to a very good life with a deep sense of well-being and greater ability to benefit other people. Then the second stage, which is called the Bardo of Dharmata, then the colors appear and the lights. It's like, I think of it as the visions of an awakened mind and all the colors, and then they can form into whatever wisdom beings you've connected with in this life. That's what would appear to you. Not necessarily 5 different colors of Buddhas, but whatever your belief system is or non-belief system, somehow that would manifest at that time as wisdom beings. And you could open to that and like merge with that, with those colors, with those lights. Like instead of standing back and rejecting them or fearing them, which apparently it's so overwhelming and bright, you could merge with them. So there the instruction is, again, relax. And also know it to be your own projections. So in this sense, it's like in dream state. If you ever done lucid dreaming, you wake up in the dream, you know you're dreaming, and then you realize that, oh my goodness, I'm dreaming this, audience. And then, gosh, it looks just like the one yesterday when I wasn't dreaming. But I know I'm dreaming because I just woke up in this dream, and so I look out and I perceive it differently because I know it's my own projection. So therefore, when the big dragon suddenly appeared at the back of the room and started towards me, I might be interested because rather than afraid, because I would know it to be my own projection of my own mind. So in that stage, again, you can have full awakening by merging with these colors and lights and these figures. That's called the Bardo of Dharmata. But should you miss that, then you do go unconscious. That's the text says that, and everyone seems to agree on that. And so that could be for a number of days, and then when you wake up, you're in what's called the Bardo of Becoming. And this, from what I read, my understanding of this is exactly like a dream. The Bardo of Dharmata is dreamlike in that it's your projections, but it's such a magnificent display, of sight and sound. But now you wake up, and it's just like waking up in your bed in the morning. You do not know you're dead, and you don't have any sense that that you've died, and you don't know what's happening, and you feel exactly like you feel right now, sitting here on the floor or on a chair, you feel exactly like this. I would feel exactly like this, like me here. And suddenly none of you are dream images, you are whatever else there is after that. But you're just the regular folks, and I'm a regular folk up here. And so at the point of the bardo of becoming, it's called the bardo between dying and being reborn. And it's very interesting because the way it's described is you don't really have a body, a physical body. Your body has died. But it's called a mental body. And in this way, it's exactly like when you're dreaming. I don't know how many of you in dreams have flown, but I used to do that a lot, and I loved doing it. I did it like this. I went and I'd go very high, and I'd go long distances, and just loved it. And so apparently, when you have a mental body, just like that, you can fly. And just like that, also, you can go through walls and things like that, because you don't actually have a physical body. And also, you can travel wherever you want just by thinking of it. So sort of like Star Trek. But instead of beaming up, you just, I think of walking down the street in New York City, and then I'm there, walking down the street in New York City. So in this way also, they say somewhat clairvoyant. This is the awkward part, is that you can read the minds of people that are still alive and hear what they're thinking about you. Oh, that's a scary one. And so it's described as a mental body, and rather than a physical body, and it is exactly like in dreams. And they say at this point, the most important thing is to realize that you are dead. Just as in lucid dreaming, the most important thing is to realize that you're dreaming. And you wake up and you realize you're dreaming, and it changes everything. You don't take anything then to be anything but a projection of your mind in the dreams. And you can play with it and have some fun with it, and you can intentionally travel places. You can do all that in the dream state if you're proficient at lucid dreaming. And in the same way, they say in the bardo of becoming, it's like that. That we naturally have these abilities. It's not like only special people have them. Everybody apparently has them at this stage. And so there's kind of it's very interesting. But what's difficult about it is that you don't get to rest anywhere for very long. I think that's pretty similar to our minds right now. They don't rest anywhere for very long. So at that point, it's like your whole body doesn't get to rest. You think of New York City, and you're on the street there, and then you think of Paris, and you're in Paris, and then you think of the Congo, and you're in the Congo, but you just keep moving. And sometimes it's pleasant, and sometimes it's unpleasant. So the very first thing they say is that not knowing that you have died, you go back to where you lived, and all your family are there. In the text says weeping, and it's confusing. You don't quite understand, and you try to communicate, but nobody realizes that you're there. So it's said that the person who's guiding the person who's dead, the book, as I was reading a little bit to you yesterday, where you read it to the person who's died for 49 days. And And one of the things is you keep reminding them that they've died. So when my mother died, Chogyam Trungpa said, not only sit there and talk to her and tell her, make her feel good, tell her what a good mother she was and how much you love her, and remember fondly things that happened. But he also said, keep reminding her that she has died and now she can just let go and let go. She doesn't have to hang around everybody, it's okay. And the equivalent of a funeral service in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition is that the whole ceremony is about encouraging the person to just let go. And you actually have a photograph of them, and you have their name, and you do some chanting, and then at a certain point, and you say a lot of aspirations for them, and people talk about them like at any memorial, and then you burn the photo and the name, and the idea is that the person gets the idea that they've passed on. They're no longer alive. And if you realize that, then it's like waking up in the dream. Then the whole thing becomes, you don't get caught in it. The other thing I didn't say about the bardo of Dharmata, which I emphasized yesterday, there's first the bardo of dying, then the bardo of Dharmata, and that one is, remember, the two different lights, the bright lights and then the dim, cozy lights. So in this life we train not to go towards the cozy lights. And then with the bardo of becoming, you train in one of the things that keeps saying over and over, and then this is emphasized in meditation, which is pay attention, stay present. Just stay present with what's ever happening. Pay attention. And then don't run away. Don't run away from what's happening if it's fearful. Just stay present and have a direct relationship. So many of you may have read this story in one of my books about my childhood friend Susie and her dream. But it's such a perfect story for how to train in this life and for the bardo. And that is that Susie had this recurring nightmare. We were very close friends, and she told me about this recurring nightmare, which was that she was running across a big room, and on the other side, kind of in a distance, there was a door, and she was being chased by monsters. And she'd get to the door and she'd struggle and she'd have trouble opening it. She'd just get it open and she'd slam it, so sort of think she was safe, and then she'd hear them opening the door, and then she'd run across another room and there was another door, and it kind of went on like that till she woke up, very afraid. So I just happened to say to her, we were like 8 years old or something, what do they look like? And she said, I don't know what they look like. I'm always running away from them. So I've never actually seen them, but they feel very big and their breath is on my neck and blah, 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 like this. So apparently she said it must have sowed a seed or something in her mind, because she said the next night she had the reoccurring nightmare, and she was through one door and running across the room to the other door, and it just occurred to her to turn around and look at them before she went through the door. And what happened is they were coming towards her very fast, and she was like very scared, and then they started sort of becoming like cartoon characters, and then she said they sort of just one-dimensional, and then they just sort of started crumbling and they disappeared because she was standing there and looking at them. And then she never had those reoccurring nightmares again. That particular one she never had. So that's like Dharma instruction, Susie's dream. So whether it's right now, and of course, let's say we're not particularly talking about you're just about to be mugged and you just stand there and look at the person. We're talking more about being afraid and facing our fear. And it doesn't take someone who's about to mug you, rob you, hurt you, for you to be afraid. As we know, we all experience a lot of fear. So it's about turning and having a direct relationship with what frightens you. And this isn't something you just go from being terrified to suddenly being able to do. It's like a gradual process of sort of turning a little bit and then rushing through the door, and more as days go by, weeks and months go by of meditation practice and facing your demons this way. Little by little, you more and more get the knack until you can actually do what she did, was actually stand there and watch them. So I read about the story about two Buddhist monks, and my memory is they were from Cambodia, but or Cambodian temple in California someplace. And these two monks had an aspiration that they wanted to prostrate from the whole West Coast, from Washington State all the way to the tip of California, where it hits the Mexican border. They wanted to go down on their knees, touch their hands and forehead to the ground, and then stand up, and then take a few steps, and then do that again for the whole length of the West Coast, the two of them together. And their intention was to relate with whatever happened to them during that trip as they were interdependent with whatever arose. It wasn't separate from them. It was part of them. And they wanted to relate to it with openness and fearlessness. So it was a journey to try to cultivate fearlessness as well as love and compassion and a deep sense of our interdependence. So they started, and then according to their story, what one of them was telling, they got to, I think, someplace like South Central Los Angeles. And a neighborhood where you should be careful. And sure enough, they got surrounded, because here they were, these bald men in robes, and looking very unusual, to say the least. And so a group of young men started taunting them and threatening them. And the monk said that he was so afraid that literally his knees were knocking together. And so one of them, one of the young men, picked up a top of a garbage can or something that had a sharp edge and was going around like this, threatening to cut them. And so he just remembered their intention, and then what he did was he prostrated to the young man. And then it had this amazing effect of the whole thing just stopped. The young men were it was so unexpected to be prostrated to at a time like this. And whether it was their admiration or what it felt like to be respected that way, or whatever it was, they just kind of parted and let these two young guys just keep prostrating through the neighborhood. And I'm sure they prostrated a lot faster than they had been. But it was an amazing story of, like, of taking these kind of teachings to that degree of seriousness. And I've often thought about it. Would I have the courage to prostrate in that situation? And I don't know if I would or not, you know. But I think I'd want to give it a try, you know. And with no telling what the outcome would be. But in that case, the outcome was a very touching one. Because it was like their intention was they weren't separated from these young men. They were interdependent together. And the young men were not separated from them. And so that's how they dealt with it. So in the Bardo of Becoming, you have this, this mental body, and the advice is to pay attention, to stay present, to not run away from what makes you afraid, but face it, to slow down the process and really pay attention to what's happening. And they didn't say, it doesn't say anything about prostrating, but you know, you could try that too, I guess. And so I'm wondering if there's any questions thus far about the Bardo of Becoming or a related topic.
Thank you so much, Pema.
You're welcome.
I do have a question about the Bardo of Becoming, or, I mean, maybe it's too goal-oriented a question, but in this kind of cosmic game of snakes and ladders, with the bright lights and the projections and so on, I wonder it is goal-oriented, what the goal is. I mean, if one, because I feel very fortunate. I love my life. I love life on this planet and the time I get to spend with other people. And I wonder if the aim of this whole extraordinary process is not to reincarnate.
I see.
Because if that's the goal, I'm
You
actually
don't want
very,
it.
I don't know. And it may also be because it's too challenging to think about not being here. And so maybe it's actually just fear of death. But this whole system, which was set up by our minds or Tibetans,
Yeah.
is the goal not to reincarnate?
No,
Okay.
definitely not. Because even when it says you merge, mother and child luminosity meet, and there's full awakening, or in the Bardo of Dharmata, when you merge with the lights, it's always the idea of benefiting others. Now, in this particular cosmology, it's very vast because it's not just this planet. They don't really go into any details about other galaxies and universes and planets, but you don't know where you might end up where the need would be the greatest, you see. But fully awakened people are considered trophies, you know, like get one of those in your midst and it does so much good, you know. So the intention is always to help. And then there's, in the Bardo of Becoming, there's a very interesting one, which is, it says by that time, full awakening doesn't happen. However, the choice really becomes whether you're going to be born in a pure land or be born in back in the suffering, realms of suffering. But also if you're going to be born again in samsara, so to speak, you could choose, you can slow it down so you could choose your birth, and you could choose a birth, it always says, where you would be of the most benefit to other people. So I remember when I first heard about Pure Lands, which again, you know, you just entertain the thought, well, like Thich Nhat Hanh says, right where you are now is a pure land if you could just realize it, you know. And but I heard about the Pure Lands, and I said, oh, I don't think I want to go to a Pure Land because I took the Bodhisattva vow, which means I want to come back to benefit other people. And then it was explained to me, oh no, I love this actually. Seems so kind of made by the mind of humans, this interpretation, but I like it. It says, if you're born in a Pure Land, of which there are many, it's a place where you have very few conflicting emotions and habitual responses, and your mind naturally turns to benefiting others and awakening. So in other words, you go there to speed up your spiritual journey so that when you're reborn where you're most needed, you're in the best possible shape. So it's not like a cop-out. It's a place where you get more training, and it's easier because you're less conflicted and caught up in neurosis and so forth.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hi, Pema. It's an honor to be with you this weekend. I found myself a couple years ago in a situation like you did, where my husband abruptly left after 28 years. And I thought, it might be the worst thing that happened to me. And I came across your book, When Things Fall Apart. And things had really fallen apart. And I don't know if this came from one of your books. I've read about 4, but I attribute it to you. And I live in Los Angeles, where, of course, the traffic is really bad. And I believe I read something where you said how you are in traffic is how you are in life. So
it's pretty good if I did.
So I think about you often. As I'm driving in a hurry to get to therapy so I can dump something. But my question has to do with the divorce. I'm finding in the last several months that people who are also newly divorced are kind of finding me, and it's sometimes frightening and sometimes enlightening. And I don't mean like they want to connect with me or date with me. It's like it's almost like they want information. And I don't know why that's happening. And I just thought maybe you could shed some light as to why I'm attracting these people.
Do you have anything to share with them?
Anything to share with them?
About how you went through your divorce?
Oh, yeah, definitely recommend reading your books. That's usually the number one.
Well, actually, I pass out little cards in all the major cities of the world that say to find you. And even if it's just by email or texting or something, because then you'll tell them of my books and the sales will just skyrocket. I think that's probably the reason,
I think you're right. Thank you. I think, anyway.
I think a good way to think about bardos, and divorce would be a good one for this, is chance of a lifetime. The bottom falls out, something is ended, and you don't know what's coming next, and you're just hanging out, and you wish it was over. You'd like to scramble and get ground again, but it's the chance of a lifetime, wide open possibilities of how you might go. That's when transformation occurs, if you're not resisting. Yes.
Good morning, and thank you. My family is from the mountains of eastern Kentucky, and I live in New York City, so that probably tells you a lot of some of the things I struggle with. I have 7 siblings, and we all have gotten along pretty well in terms of our political, spiritual, personal differences until this past election. And I've been an activist all my life, and I day to day live in the resistance. And of course, in psychology and many relationships, resistance is not always looked at as a kind of thing that promotes communication. Yet, I'm most concerned about the strains in the relationships. It's very difficult for me to be around and listen to people who support the kind of words and intentions of our temporary president. So I just wondered if you had any thoughts about how to manage or deal with that.
My first thought is to think of that story of the monks and coming up against something that scared them so much that their knees were shaking and that they prostrated. And if it were a Bardo experience, and you say, whoa, this is a bad Bardo experience, you might regard it as, this is a hard one to kind of get your mind around, but as your own projection, but at least interdependent. And of course, there's a lot of articles about this, like where did this phenomena come from, and how we're all part of how it got to this place, you know. But there's some way, I think, to hold dear to yourself and speak your truth and do always what you feel will benefit other people the most, whether that's speaking out or resisting and marching and the different things. But I think there has to be that, like in civil rights movement, the idea of the beloved community, that somehow we're all in this together, even though it feels so completely polarized and stunningly so, and unexpectedly so. Nevertheless, I don't think hatred doesn't trump hatred, to excuse the verb, you know. So not just mirroring back what's coming at you, and so aggression, just escalating aggression in you, you know, back and forth, then that's just adding more aggression to the planet with different belief systems and views. So somehow there has to be more of a willingness to take care of each other and not hold hatred in your heart. And actually that makes you more clear-seeing, and you might be much, you or others, that's how you become an effective communicator, you know. And how brilliant ideas come up that actually promote positive change for the benefit of the greatest number of people. It doesn't come out of hatred, it seems to come out of, it can come out of anger, but not hatred. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I totally agree and understand that and try to work on that. I guess what I'm asking in addition is it okay to separate myself from some people who are even family because it's hard to listen to the things they say or the acts they are doing? It's that act of not hating but separating to protect myself or to not condone it silently.
Yeah. It's so interesting with family because you have so much shared history, so much same same genetic inheritance. And it's a shame, really, when our political and religious views separate us. Most people, the way they handle it is they just don't talk about those things, you know. However, it sounds like maybe in your family that's unavoidable, and it comes up. And yeah, if you feel you need to protect yourself, what would happen to you?
Well, it's just when I'm around them and in some way their views come up, I get it's hard for me not to counter it in some way or say really or you know, just I don't want to be, you know, it's quite well known that silence is what condones evil.
Yeah.
So that's where the conflict comes from me. I don't want to be silent. I've been silent about it all my life with them, and just
Yeah.
kind of we all did our thing and supported ourselves in the way that we can and want to.
Right, right, right.
But to me, silence isn't an option now in terms of the world.
Yeah, I understand. I really understand. So, honestly, you sound like a very wise woman whose heart is definitely in the right place. And so I just hand it back to you, you know, to figure out how to keep the love alive for them that's also there. And not just remain silent, but, you know, but on the other hand, not provoke more aggression. And if it's just impossible, sure, just keeping your distance, you know. Send the Christmas cards and the birthday cards and with sweet little happy faces and things, but don't visit until we have a new president, you know. I want to go on a little bit, but then the gentleman in the blue shirt can be next. And so the bardo of becoming ends, well, it ends either with you going to a Pure Land. So I know all of this sounds a little like Walt Disney or something, but the book is, if you read the book or you read commentaries on the book, it's very, very thought-provoking. Even if you don't buy it, it's still evocative about how to live our life now. So how to prepare, not necessarily for a next birth, but for tomorrow. And so one of the things that's said is that, in terms of the worldview, is that you can be born in one of 6 different realms. Now, I've always been curious why they just came up with 6, you know. It seems like there's a lot more possibilities than that. But they have, but there is, interestingly enough, in terms of other religious views, there is a hell realm, sorry to tell you, and there is also something, a curious twist on heaven, because it's called the God realm. And when you read descriptions of it, it sounds like what most of us would strive for, you know. Actually, everybody has enough money, everybody has enough food, it looks great. You have just the right amount of sort of spirituality and just the right amount of like everything. It's like perfect. And the only problem with it is it doesn't last. That's its only problem. It's considered like the God realm. And when it's described, it said the suffering eventually comes because it's also impermanent and it ends. And the suffering of leaving that is really intense. So, but it's considered a psychological state, the God realm, and its real downside, beside the fact that it ends and so that suffering happens eventually, is that you have it so together that you're out of touch with the suffering of the world. You might dabble, like give money to the suffering of the world, or somehow, because it's part of what a good person does, pay some kind of lip service to the suffering of the world, but actually you've never experienced it, which seems unbelievable, but you've never experienced it, so you have no natural empathy or compassion, because your situation is such a bubble. It's such a bubble that you're in, and everybody you know has the same beliefs, and it's all very smooth, and you're really out of touch with the depth of suffering in the world. So curiously enough, they say the best realm to be reborn in is the human realm, which we happen to be in, according to the Tibetan way of talking about this. And the reason that this is the perfect place is it's not like a hell realm where it's a projection of a mind of hatred and rage, where everything that happens just makes you more and more angry. And so you just stay locked in a hellish state of mind, and the environment appears hellish to you. That's so intense that it's very hard to get out, although I'll talk to you about how you can, in case you happen to be right there. And it's not like a God realm where everything is so beautiful and everything's so taken care of and everything is so, the bubble is so made out of rainbow light, you know, where you don't really have any suffering and you don't think about other people. So the human realm is perfect balance of just enough pleasure and happiness to have you enjoy life, and just enough suffering to start you questioning about things. And so the life that you got is considered the perfect balance of pleasure and pain, alternating. That's one of the things that doesn't happen in the God realm. They don't alternate. It's just pure pleasure. And it doesn't happen in the hell realm because it's just pure hell. But in the human realm, as you may have noticed, it's alternating pleasure and pain. Some people say, well, it doesn't alternate much with me. It's pretty much solid suffering. But then if you really question somebody, there's always these highlights of pleasure, even if it's eating a strawberry, you know. So, so it's considered the perfect place. So when you are reborn, you're reborn according to your state of mind and the propensities that you brought in with you. Again, this is just a Tibetan worldview of things. But to me, it's very fascinating in terms of next week, let alone, you know, forget about next lifetime. What am I doing now to create the most, to make so that I will be the person with the most, my heart will be more open next week. My mind will be less biased and prejudiced next week. My heart and mind will be more open next month and next year than they are now, rather than the opposite, where a lot of people, and probably a few in this room, but you know, just a couple maybe, go through life where your propensities just get stronger and stronger and stronger as you go on. Until, as I said, you know, you have a fit if someone moves your lamp. So how do you want it to work out for you? So in terms of being born in different realms, which is what, if you read the book, it will talk about that, it seems like we got the perfect birth in terms of being able to wake up and to benefit other people, to be of help to others. And it goes hand in hand. The more more we can open our mind to its natural state, the more we can connect with our heart, the more we're there for other people, the more we can stand in their shoes and help each other, support each other. So, what's said is one positive thought in the bardo, even one positive thought. So if this is true, has tremendous power. So if this is true in the bardo of becoming, why isn't it true right now? That even one positive thought has tremendous power. And so I was talking to someone, or we were reading an article, and basically it was about how to get out of hell. But it was talking about hellish mind state. But it would be the same thing as then projecting a world where everything's, when you feel like you're in hell, then the world feels threatening, provoking, not a pleasant place. And you don't think about other people except as adversaries. So it was about how to get out of hell, and it was very interesting because it said one positive thought has tremendous power to just move you out of, when you're stuck in a realm, you can step out of it by interrupting the momentum with even one positive thought. So it reminded me of a story about the Buddha. There's these, they're usually for children, but adults also read Jakata tales. They're the stories of all the past lives of Gautama Buddha. And so in this particular story, he was in hell. And he was actually in a hell realm, and it was very much like Dante's hell. He and another man are pushing this huge rock, huge boulder, up a steep mountain, and they're being whipped, and it's kind of a brutal situation. And they push it all the way to the top, and then it rolls down, crushes them. Then they're at the bottom, and they have to push it up. What is it, Sisyphus? Yeah. So it's a Sisyphus-like situation for the Buddha, who wasn't called the Buddha then. He was probably, who knows what he was called. And loser, probably. So, angry loser. So, who knows where it came from? Maybe from the aspirations of human beings like ourselves who aspire for people in deep suffering to be free of suffering. Maybe that's where it came from, but he had a positive thought, which is, you stay in hell because everything just enrages you. But he had a positive thought, which was, this other man who's pushing the rock up with me is suffering so greatly. And so he said to him, you rest and I'll just push it up myself. And then the guards were scornful, and they said, that's not possible because he has his own karma. That's a whole nother topic. But because he had that positive thought, of course, in this kind of, I always see it as like a comic strip thing, he just like popped right out of hell into someplace else, which was more conducive to awakening. But I thought about that story and was discussing it with my friend, or the whole notion of how you can get out of realms, dark realms, places of jealousy, places of hatred, places of terror, where it's all about yourself, and the whole atmosphere is so claustrophobic. And the way to get out is to interrupt the momentum of that habitual pattern of hatred, or habitual pattern of addictive craving, or habitual pattern of rage. And you do that by, and this said, just one positive thought. So what I know from having worked with a lot of students and being in touch with them and hearing about their practice and their life from them over long periods of time is that this is an ability that begins to grow because of meditation practice and one's intention to use the language I was just using, to interrupt the momentum of these habitual patterns. That what used to bring them down, or bring me down, or bring any of us down, where we would just bite the hook completely and be swept away, there's a little more distance, and you feel the heat arising, you hear the angry, the resentful, the bitter thoughts starting, and there's a little bit of awareness that the whole thing is happening, and you realize you have a choice when you're in the bardo of this life to interrupt that momentum. And someone was telling me the only way they can interrupt the momentum currently is they have to go out and jog. And that's sort of like when you and your partner are arguing and they say, go out and walk around the block. You change the channel somehow, you know? And reminds me of like when I had very bad chronic fatigue for almost 20 years, and I felt horrible a lot of the times. Sometimes I just had to change the channel, and it didn't make the chronic fatigue go away, but the mindset that went along with it could get so dark and despairing. And I did it by reading the entire Harry Potter series 3 times. Because I would find that if I would sit down with Harry Potter, that I would just go into the story, and there's so many books that you can read it 3 times because you forget completely what happened the first one. And it would change the energy somehow. I just would be more relaxed with what was happening when I would be finished reading. So somehow finding a way to change the channel or interrupt the momentum or create some kind of a pause or gap in the whole thing, that's how we work with getting out of hell or getting out of dark places, claustrophobic places, getting out of being caught in the trap of our own minds, you know, mind-created states because of strong emotions. So, next question.
Hello, Pema. Hello, friends. Thank you. Thank everyone for the warmth you've shared the past few days. I'm Scott. My problem is I'm kind of content, happy a lot, glass half full, and I wonder if you want to talk me out of it. I appreciate what you said Friday night about that these lessons apply to non-Buddhists, and I'm not a Buddhist fully yet. And since you said that, I've been thinking in the course of our sessions, what am I? And
Oh, that's a profound question.
yeah, really. Well, I didn't get too far in the profound department, but I think I would call myself in a generous tone a synthesist, and I'll explain what I mean by that. Or either that or I'm waffling and indecisive. And I'm an agnostic, I'm a biomedical scientist, quantitative reductionist, I'm an atheist when I debate against fundamentalist Christian creationists. You can't be a waffling agnostic when you go up against them. And I love the setting behind you, and I want to just comment on it. The stairway, it's a beautiful fall stairway, but my vision has at least 5 stairways going up. And I love scampering up one stairway and seeing what's up there, and then scampering back down, and I've recently been scampering up the Stoic stairway, and of course these, you know, the cosmology and the quantum physics, and William James and Henry James, all the James brothers, the Dalai Lama, who inspired me in 1979. I just realized when I first saw him Who else? Oh, Pema Shogren. But what I really love is not just scampering up and down, but bushwhacking in the areas between these stairways. And I'm content with this. And even in a serious perspective of thinking about my own mortality, whether it's tomorrow or a year or a few decades, maybe I'll make it even into my 80s. It's all right. And so I'm content with this. I think I'm content with this. I don't want to take time going into details. I had a false diagnosis of a deadly illness 7 years ago, and wow, that's a great thing if you can have it. And then as long as it's a false diagnosis,
Right.
boy, it puts things in perspective. But I'm content with this, but I'm all over the board. And you've obviously taken a path, and I recognize that if one focuses on a single path, you can get further up the stairway. But I'm content with my, as I call it, synthesis approach. And I guess I wonder, do you want to talk me out of it? Is there a Buddhist 12-step program for people, suffering with my ailment? And in your own life, how do you? I mean, you've made the decision to deeply follow the one path, and I don't know if maybe in your answer you might comment it on from your personal perspective. Thank you.
Yeah. So stay right there, though. Well, they took a photo of my path and they hung it up behind me. But I don't know where it goes. I don't want to talk you out of it. Definitely, I think contentment is. Some people have to work really, really spend their whole life trying to even get a little flavor of what contentment even might smell like, So you're very fortunate, very fortunate. The only thing I would say, I mean, you wanted me to comment about all the different things and stuff, but that sounds like intellectual curiosity or something like that, And do you go up them all to answer questions about big questions?
Yeah, another thing I thought of saying, since I'll respond to that, is again, this sounds absurd and arrogant, and I recognize that. I'm seeking a grand unification theory of human knowledge and spirituality and existence, and I know I'm going to fail. I know I'm going to fail, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah. So the main thing I would address, and then you can respond, is since I always feel that those of us who have fortunate situations, and that's interesting, it's not always because we had a fortunate childhood or a fortunate that we have wealth or any of those things, but our state of mind is so, we're born positive-minded. I think that's a great blessing. And then it, like in my case, it was a great blessing to have something just knock me flat because it kind of got me going deeper, I guess you could say. And then, but I came out still holding that half full glass, But I'd learned a lot in the process. But for me, that I feel we have more responsibility to be of benefit to our fellow creatures on this earth, human beings and animals, and the planet itself, because of our good fortune and our contentment to use that as a basis for helping other people. Because if our contentment and walking around with our glass, it's not half full, it's completely full.
Mine's only half full. I got witnesses to that.
So do you see what I'm saying? Like, I feel we have a commitment to use that good fortune to help other people who are suffering so greatly. And that doesn't mean necessarily in a big way like activist, but it would mean all the people that you meet that come into your life. that you're there to help them, when they need help. So I would say if that aspect is there, the heart aspect, then balances the curiosity and the looking for the unified theory. But that would be very important, that you almost owe it to the world because of your good fortune.
I see that, and that is the hardest part, but I'm striving at that as well.
Oh, good. Then I hit on something. So, so really, just contemplate that, and just let it be when the opportunity presents itself, step forward with your hand out and just help, And so for the rest of your life, you could cultivate that. And then the rest is already cultivated. You don't have to cultivate it. You already have it, the contentment, the curiosity, but then the heart part, that was what you'd cultivate.
Thank you. And the woman whose mother's had all those novels that were not read, I would be happy to volunteer to read one of them.
Oh, very nice.
Good morning, Ani Pema.
Good morning.
I'm thinking about, we touched upon the bardo of retirement yesterday, and I'm sort of in that bardo of a transitional state, quasi, and I've just left 21 years in medicine to transition to another way of service, probably within the world of medicine, and a passion that I have is around death and dying, and I think that we do not die well. And I think that the collective we in medicine needs to own a part of that based on how we train. And so I've made connections with folks in the Zen Buddhist hospice area, and I'm in the space of not knowing what it's going to look like. I don't think it's going to be very cookie cutter. And I'm wondering if you might have any thoughts about where you see within the realm of medicine where one might bring some awareness. I have random ideas and thoughts, but I just wondered if you might have any thoughts.
I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Well, I think that in medicine we're charged with two duties: to treat the patient and to treat the disease, and we over-treat the disease and we forget the patient.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that there are many aspects of why that happens, not the least of which is our training: identify a problem and fix it. Fix it. Everything has to be fixed. And so it's a failure, and death is not seen as an option. And I think there's also an element of a lack of intimacy, I think, probably with ourselves, which means then we can't have that intimacy with our patients.
Right.
And so I love to speak, I love to teach. I'm wondering if there's something that needs to be shaken up a little bit in the curriculum or where maybe to bring that idea that it's okay to talk about death, it's okay to die. None of us is getting out of this world alive.
Right. Well, there was a wonderful book written in the last 8 years or so by a doctor who, what's it called?
Atul Gawande, probably?
Yes,
He's written
yes,
several.
yes, yeah. So do you feel in tune with his view?
For the most part, yes. And it's funny, when I actually met him in person, he was a little nonplussed by my thoughts, but that's okay. I'm all right with that. Yes, very much in tune.
So, so that way of thinking and your own version of that and your own insights into that, how, for instance, to let people die when it's time to die, for instance, and that's always a question, I've had this conversation with my children because I know resuscitation kind of thing, and then they'll say, well, what about if, it's a hard decision to make sometimes. But when actually someone is dying and then the modern medicine just wants to keep them alive when they're just having a natural death, because of an illness or age or whatever it is. Then the other thing is not treating them as human beings, lack of sensitivity, because you have so many patients and so forth. That when someone is dying, that there could be some quietness in the atmosphere. When someone has died, that the family could if they want to, could sit with the body and it doesn't have to just be whisked out immediately. Things like that, like sensitivity, as some of these books about, there's one by, we couldn't get it for the bookstore because it's being reprinted, but it's called Preparing to Die by Andrew Holochek. And in that book and others like it, they talk about being really, the person is having this huge transition. They're dying. It's like so momentous. And yet they can be so alone and no one's there to talk to them, no one's there to hold their hand, people just aren't sympathetic to what's happening. So just somehow having it, as you say, more patient-oriented, right? More patient-oriented.
A quick comment, as you mentioned that, there is a nurse, I think in Pennsylvania, actually brother of a friend of mine, who instituted something called the pause. And it was something where he realized that he works in an ER, and realized that, everybody's doing everything they can furiously to save this person, and the person dies, and everybody sort of like takes off their gloves and walks out of the room.
Right.
And so he said, could we just all stop here? And so now it's a thing that is being done, which I think is really beautiful.
That's really acknowledging.
Yeah.
Acknowledging.
Atul Gawande is the author. His last one is Being Mortal. He's written several.
Being Mortal. That's the one I was thinking of, yeah.
Yeah.
Being Mortal.
Yeah. And one quick question. Could you comment on, I think Trungpa Rinpoche used to say, all of life is ceremony. I heard that said. And I'm not sure I quite grasp it, and I'm wondering if it's talking about the arisings and fallings that we're talking about in Bardo and transition.
Yeah, that's one way of looking at it for sure, in terms of what we've been talking about. And treating it with respect and paying attention to the details of what's happening. So there's a sense of the flow, which is, as I study these and we discuss it here this weekend, to me that almost seems like the key thing is getting used to in this lifetime, as I say, not even necessarily preparing for the Bardo or for the next lifetime, but for next week and next year, to get used to be able to relax with, familiarity and relaxation with the fact that it's flowing and moving, and that we're in process, that the whole thing is in process. And as someone said, it's like water logic instead of rock logic. It's just the way our minds think about things could be more water-like instead of rock-like. The way we experience life could be a contemplation on the impermanence. And then even the sadness or whatever might arise, allowing for that to be there as also part of a flow of things that come and go.
Thank you.
Hi, Pema. My name is Maui. I'm a Filipino immigrant. I'm a physical therapist for elderly folks. I did community organizing for immigrants and LGBTQ communities. And now I hold healing circles for queer, transgender, non-conforming people of color community in New York City.
Good for you.
So I'm just going to read this. I'm wondering if you have any words about the specific and ongoing suffering that comes from systemic injustice.
Systemic?
Systemic injustice.
Injustice,
Yes.
yeah.
I've lived through physical illness, poverty, separation from family because of migration, familial violence, homophobia, and more, all of which I have endured and learned from. And yet I find the pain of being at the hands of systems of oppression, racism, homophobia, xenophobia, class inequality, as something that I'm unable to reconcile. So I'd like to hear your thoughts. And I also want to know if you have a message for people in my community, specifically parents who get separated from their children because of deportation, or Black trans women of color who are constant victims of violence, who can't even get to the subway because of fear of getting hurt. So I just want to hear what you think. Thank you.
Well, I think what comes to mind is the goodness of people and the courage of people as a sort of fundamental thing. So I'm not really addressing the systems of oppression so much as the resilience and beauty of the human spirit and what it's able to endure, and how so frequently the greater the suffering in one's life, so frequently that causes one to have that degree also of empathetic connection with others in the same boat. Would you say that's true?
Yes.
And so sometimes you wonder that if you were, if there was like a futuristic movie or something, and all the characters of it were in the bardo, and they were being given the opportunity to choose where they would be born and what their load would be in order to be of the greatest benefit to others, I sometimes think it would be the ones who get these very like your own life, because they, some of course, understandably, get so weighted down that it just turns into depression and maybe drug abuse, and because you just can't face the difficulty is so great. But for perhaps in this futuristic movie, a lot of us would choose a difficult birth because it would so bring out our compassion and love for others in the same situation. And then without hatred of the injustice and those who perpetuate injustice, on the other hand, our life would be dedicated to uplifting people rather than attacking the systems, which is so difficult to do. How did they even get that way, Instead, you devote your life to uplifting people's hearts, and so that if they're at a place where they could go down into depression or be inspired to reach out to others, you help them to reach out to others. Do you see what I'm saying? So somehow, just listening to you, that's what comes to mind, is the beauty and strength of people. So often, people that are oppressed, they band together to, in a peaceful way, to express their unity, solidarity with other oppressed peoples, So any opportunity that we have to help people's hearts to open rather than close down and harden, we take that opportunity, because we know that the potential is there to love and have empathy and care for each other. But also darkness can weigh you down to such a degree, that you feel you can't breathe practically. So I don't know if that's useful. But.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer. Thank you.
Wow. I'm again and again just, struck by who's next in by people's courage and strength in the face of enormous difficulty. Yeah.
Good morning. I'm so happy to be here. I have a quick little story, and then I want to say something about everything I heard this week and that I was able to hold on to. And my story is that my brother was lying in his hospice bed, and my sisters were there, his wife, his children, their children, and he woke up for a moment, and he looked around at everyone, and he said, "Wow."
Oh, oh, that's wonderful.
He truly did. And then he slipped past and he transitioned.
Wow.
So, and I didn't remember that. I didn't remember that till I was dealing with my own disappointment yesterday that you weren't here in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And as I stepped off the porch, I said, "Wow." Bobby said, "Wow." So I just wanted to share that. But I also wanted to say that the first night you mentioned retirement, you mentioned giving things away, and which is where I'm at now. I'm a retired hospice social worker. And I'm also dealing with, now that I'm retired from full-time work, I just recently gave notice that I was closing my little shop in a big co-op. And people keep saying to me, "Well, what will you do?" And I say, "Well, I'll just be." And it'll tell me then I'll know what to do next. And I also think of you, and I think of my disappointment that you weren't here yesterday, and I believe other people felt like that. But the fact that I was able to put that aside and just take in what was available to me, and that I also took a nap, which I think I really needed after all so much driving. And so I was much better able to do the meditation. And I was thinking how you seem to be staggering, because people said to me when I signed up, "Oh, she's retired. Isn't she retired?" And no, I'm going to be there. So she's not retired. So I was just wondering if you had anything to say about that, kind of trying to balance getting into that, Vardo, or maybe for you it will always be just lesser time at doing your presentations.
Less time.
Mm-hmm. And retirement.
Yeah. Well, I think spiritual teachers don't get to retire. I sort of began to realize that. But during my year of retreat, I thought, yeah, but I could streamline a little bit, you know. So I've been coming to Omega for 2 times a year and teaching 4 times. And at the end, really scrape me up off the floor, you know, I'm so tired. So I decided, well, I could do 1 time a year, and then in the fall, which will be in the spring, and then in the fall, I would have the whole fall free for meditation, which is a really good thing for a person to do is in their 80s, you know, or any age. But still, with death obviously closer. And and then I said, and I could give 3 talks instead of 4, allowing for more time to meditate in the afternoon, which I've always felt we needed more of that, you know. Otherwise, it's just talk. So, so this was the maiden voyage, you know, of what I'm planning to do going forward. And I found it. I slept most of yesterday afternoon, and I found it very. I'm not tired now at the end, and so it's great. So, so maybe at 90 I'll change it again, but we'll see.
Maybe I'll come back and find out at 90.
Okay.
Thank you.
So this will be the last question, the one that's about to happen. So I hope it was worth the wait.
I just turned 42, and I'd say this is the ultimate holy SHWA moment of my life to this point, to be in front of you. I wish I could say that 2.5 years ago, things came crashing down, but the truth is, for 39 years, I was admittedly a horrible person, just terrible to everything. And a great friend of mine gave me a book, The Wisdom of No Escape. And it was like I was drowning for years. And a hand reached out and told me that I could breathe again. It just revolutionized everything for me. So Thank you.
Oh, gosh, you're so welcome.
I've been practicing for 2 years, and my thirst for Buddhism is unquenchable. I can't get enough. West Coast, I go overseas. I started doing volunteer work. I'm going to a retreat right after this in West Virginia. I can't get enough. But it's opened me up to other people. It's polarizing to people I found. They're so used to this a-hole. It's amazing what I used to be. And that person, we talk about rebirth in so many different ways.
Yeah,
For me, it was an awakening. That person's no longer here.
yeah.
I mean, I did work in Nepal this year, and I have two small, 9/11, my kids, and I took such criticism over being away from my kids, for being away from them. And as I explained it to my children, only humans can take care of other human beings. This is our job. There's people in Nepal, people all over the world that no one else is going to do this except for us. And I got through to them. But for some reason, adults don't get that. I am consistently the target of criticism. It's just like the way I look. I tell people, don't judge me on what you see. Judge me on my beliefs and what I do out of those beliefs. And it's still, I don't need to justify myself to people. I'm okay with my decisions. But I don't know what to say to them anymore. And on a side note, I have to admit there is massive guilt on my part because I do feel a draw for the monastic life. Maybe not now, maybe not in 10 years, but I think, what if my grandkids, I'm in a monastery, what's my life going to be like? How can I even have these thoughts of having my 2 kids? But I can't fight the fact that it's so appealing to me, and yet on the other side I have this guilt. How can I think this way with my 2 kids? I have a responsibility to them. But then when I meditate, I turn around and there's my son behind me meditating, and he's 9. So I'm doing something right, I guess. But I just don't know how to weigh all this criticism and this guilt. Because the truth is, I'm not stopping. There's no going back now. This is the path. There's no excuse. But again, thank you for, you mean so much to me. I can never say thank you enough for what you've done in my life.
Well, how do you feel in your heart about these people that criticize you?
I used to think they were my friends. There's no anger. There's no hate. I feel pity for them because I look at their lives and I see their misery. I see their anger and I think, oh, I'm looking at a reflection of what I used to be like. And a teacher out in Green Gulch told me, do not preach, answer questions. So I don't push what I believe in. I do answer questions, but it seems people are so caught up in what I used to be like that they can't see me now. And I'm okay with that, because the people who really can't understand that, I'm guessing. And in the end, I go to sleep smiling. I wake up smiling. I've never felt like this. This is the culmination. Every day I go forward, like being here, this is the culmination of everything. Every day, every step I take, this is what my life is supposed to be. And again, I feel bad for them, but I can't worry about them. This is the path.
Right. Guilt's hard, though, isn't it?
I hate
Guilt.
it.
Guilt, yeah. There's a story about a woman at Green Gulch, which is the Zen community in Marin County right across from San Francisco. She is a friend of mine. She wrote about this. she was very, very angry person, even though she was a Zen priest, shaved head and all, but very angry. And so she worked in the administration, sometimes in the Green Gulch and sometimes in the city center, Zen Center. And people just got used to the fact that she was really prickly and she would go off on things really fast. And so when she sort of came toward them, they kind of armored themselves, ready for the blast, which usually came. So because she was sincere, she started really, that was her main focus, is working with her anger. And she applied everything from the Buddhist teachings to her meditation practice and other therapies and anything that would help her not be in the clutches of her anger, like the hellish realm. And it wasn't easy, but she was determined and she really worked hard, and she has a partner who was a big support to her. And went on like that for about 5 years. She continued to work in the office. And gradually she started shedding the anger. And her partner kept giving her the feedback, you're not the person you were, You've really shed it. She said it took 10 years for the other people to recognize that she no longer had the anger. And it was gradual. In the beginning, first couple of years, even though she didn't have it anymore, she wasn't reacting the same way, they were still they kept their distance, they guarded themselves, and she could just see it. And, but gradually, it began to dawn on people, slowly, that wait a minute, she hasn't gone off on any of us for quite a long time, years.
I've had those moments.
Yeah. And so she said 10 years. Of the light bulbs sort of dim and then brighter and going off, and people began to see that she had changed. But her image of her, their image they held in their mind of her was so much this enraged, prickly person that it took, she said, 10 years, slowly dawning, until they just started treating her differently, as a non-angry person. So I guess I'm just saying patience, and that a lot of it, what's coming at you is a result of how you used to be. People still seeing you that way, and and it's not easy for people to change their view of somebody who's been threatening to them or whatever, But you just continue with your path. And gradually they'll begin to see. And I was always taught, for instance, because in my own family nobody were Buddhists and some people were antagonistic, just set a good example. Like they said to you, don't preach, just answer questions. And also live your life in a way that they begin to admire how you treat people and how you take care of things and selflessness and these things, but it takes a while for them to not see you the way you used to be, and therefore criticize you, for not being how you used to be too. That's kind of the other side of it. So.
Thank you. I love you.
I didn't cover everything I wanted to say, but the main thing is relax. Boils down to that. And I just wanted to say a few thank yous. I want to say thank you to all of you. It's actually a lot of fun to interact. And even though I just get to talk to a few people, I get to see people's expressions, at least the ones in front. And when I stand up, I see some in the back too. But I wanted to thank the whole Omega staff. It's kind of remarkable. I was in here today is Sunday, so Friday, and John Kabat-Zinn was finishing up a program, and it looked completely different. The whole stage was over there, and the seats were all arranged differently, and you know, it's a lot of work to just to rearrange this as a whole new situation. And so that was just me seeing 2 different times. I'm sure they just do this over and over and over, rearrange, and the sound people and the people that set up our accommodations and help us to our rooms, and the whole Omega staff I want to thank, and in particular the 2 people that relate with us most closely and have for years are Jim Cullender and Jillian, and I want to thank them in particular. In terms of the people that you know, keep me together, keep me from falling apart during these weekends, which is easier now that I don't do the Saturday afternoon, but still. Hope Martin, who cooks for me and takes care of the house, and Glenna Olmsted, my beloved secretary. So to you. And then there are the people who run the Pema Chodron Foundation. It's amazing. They work really, really hard and enthusiastically. And so Margie and Martha are here, and Tim, of course. So I want to thank them. And then there's the 2 gentlemen that stood beside me at the beginning of the weekend, who you now know very well. So Richard and Tim, I want to thank you both. And Tim, you know, he took on a lot this time. We're co-teaching now. And I really, really feel blessed, you know, and so fortunate. So thank you. Thank you. So. All right. We should say the final thing. And this time, let's say it 3 times. When the appearances of this life dissolve, may I, with ease and great happiness, let go of all attachments to this life, like a son or daughter returning home. When the appearances of this life dissolve, may I, with ease and great happiness, let go of all attachments to this life, like a son or daughter returning home. And when the appearances of this life dissolve, may I, with ease and great happiness, let go of all attachments to this life, like a son or daughter returning home. Thank you very, very much.